Um, well, it looks like we got a live stream. Okay. Let me get this set up here. And my name's Moshe, and I'm coming to you from Israel in the Galilee. And it seems to be a nice, comfortable day today. It's about 7:34 in the morning, and our weather in the Galilee is 70 degrees now, 87 high, and that's nice. No rain or anything. No rain? Yeah, no rain. And then tomorrow it creeps up to 93 and then 92 for Shabbat. So we have Shabbat weather, punishment weather, I guess. And they're observing their false Yom Kippur because the calendar's all wrong with the rabbis. So they did something new. They actually shut some of the small villages and cities. Like we have gates, so when there's security problems, they have we have people with guns and radios to the police and the military that monitor the gate, and they gotta know who you are to get in. And you got to get like a sticker for your car, and they don't give you the sticker for the car unless they know you live here, and there's stuff like that. So they're closing the gates on Yom Kippur. They're doing it in the city of Tiberias, 40,000 people. And Tiberias is heavy secular. There's a lot of Russians there that don't, they eat pork and they don't observe the Shabbat or anything. So they're imposing their will on some of these people now. I used to just see things like this happen in Mea Shearim in Jerusalem, the ultra-Orthodox neighborhood in Bnei Brak in Tel Aviv. It would just be neighborhoods, though. This is odd. I don't think it's going to work out for them. They kind of dropped it as a surprise, and I think a lot of people are going to blow back. There's about half of Israel that is very distrustful of the rabbis and wants them to have less power, not more power. Doesn't trust them worth a hoot. They see the hypocrisy and the nonsense the rabbis teach, and they don't buy it one bit. I'm not talking messianics either. The alibi story you'll get regarding shutting the gates is they're trying to stop the people from sinning, like working or driving a car on the Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is not about fasting, not eating food. It's about examining yourself. How could you, follow the law and make your ways pleasing to Jehovah better? It's not about flesh, not eating for 24 hours. They make it into that. They make it into a whole deal. They cut their coffee down for a few days before Yom Kippur so they don't get headaches from the coffee. And you could certainly pig out before Shabbat, before Yom Kippur, and I imagine a lot of them do that with a, what would be an example of that? Having a 24-ounce steak with 3 baked potatoes and maybe some bread and, other things, and just fill yourself up just before Shabbat, before Yom Kippur starts, and then you're going to probably be okay to some extent anyway. The rabbis are the pastor's kids. It's the same nonsense. They're teaching trash. Okay. So Israel interdicted the flotilla with warships. Spain and Italy warships dropped out and didn't come into Israeli water. I did not hear what the Turkish warships did. They probably didn't come into Israeli water. And Israel went and started with Greta's boat. They boarded the boat. That would be armed sailors. Or maybe they took commandos on the Navy boats. Probably commandos. Shayelet, most likely. Which are Navy SEALs, the Israel version. So they would like to keep them there. So I guess if somebody fell in the water, they just jump right in and rescue and stuff, Greta and the gang threw their phones into the water just before the Israeli Navy boarded them. So there was obviously things on the phones that they didn't want Israel to have as evidence. And we found documentation in Gaza that Hamas is backing them with money and everything else. So it's likely Greta's for hire, I mean, she's not going to work for Israel, but I think you want her to work for your cause. She has to agree with your cause, and then you got to pay her or him or whatever. So, we got to deal with 47 boats. I believe this is still ongoing. 47 boats and about 500 people. So we're putting them on Navy warships and taking them to the port north of Gaza, Ashkelon, and we're offloading them there, and then we're deporting them out of Israel. We waited for them to get into Israeli waters, I believe, and after we offload them, we are sinking the boats. They are being allowed to take their personal possessions with them, but the boats are getting sunk. And this is Israel's way of telling them not to do it again. The humanitarian aid allegedly on the boat getting sunk too. For Israel to allow this humanitarian aid in, the Israeli military would have had to open every single box on 47 ships and sift through it to make sure it didn't have contraband. Ridiculous, right? So Israel's not letting the humanitarian aid in. And Israel's not really bothering with searching the whole boat. They probably did a very superficial search looking for weapons, keeping the occupants of the boat under military surveillance where they were holding rifles so they could shoot them. I doubt the rifles were pointed at them. They would have been searched, told to stand in a certain area of the boat or sit. And I don't know how they got them. Maybe they let them go get their belongings. The belongings would have been not much because these were not ocean liners. There wouldn't be much room for baggage. Then they put them on the military boat and they took them, which would be a short ride. Took them to the port. They offload them into some detention center. Being Yom Kippur, I don't know if they're going to feed them on Yom Kippur. Greta may miss the sandwich that she got the last time. They're going to process them for detention. I think they'll hold them. Maybe it'll take 3 or 4 days to get them processed, but they'll be very comfortable. They're not going to lock them up in, a hard jail or anything like that, They'll be kept under minimum or medium security. And then they'll be escorted by the police to an airplane. They'll be put on the airplane, and the police will stay there, watch them board the airplane, and then watch they don't get off the airplane. So they'll stay in the terminal where the door is that people enter the plane on to make sure they don't exit the plane. And once the door is closed and the plane begins taxiing, the people will leave. The police will leave, and that's the end of that. Turkey did call us terrorists for what we did, but they didn't do anything. They probably were afraid to be the only ones doing something. If Spain and Italy wanted to stop our warships with their warships, then Turkey probably would have went along with it, but they didn't want to be stuck. So that's basically the end of the flotilla. And now Hamas and the Palestinians around the world are raising up against it. I know in Italy they're organizing protests in the street because Italy did not do anything, and they told the people on the boat to give the aid to the Vatican, and the Vatican would make sure it gets distributed in Gaza and just turn back and stuff like that. And so any country that takes a stance against them, they organize protests in that country, which is their way of manipulating the country. I believe Spain also suggested they turn back. Several countries did. Sweden, maybe. There was a bunch that told them. I'm not sure on Sweden, but there was a bunch of countries that told them to turn back. Okay, Iran said they're on war alert, and they believe an attack by Israel and or America is imminent. Russia agrees with them, and they're basing it on the war buildup. All the maybe as many as 60, 70, 80 refueling tankers brought to Europe and the Middle East in the last few days. aircraft carriers being deployed. There's 2 and there's 3 aircraft carriers in San Diego that are ready to leave port, and it's expected for them to leave. It's not a simple thing to ready the aircraft carrier to leave. It has to have weapons loaded that are appropriate for the trip. It has to have the aircraft loaded. It has to have the crew, and it has to have stores, which are, machine parts, light bulbs, shoelaces, uniforms, food, medicine, spare parts, things like this. It's a process. I think it probably, on an emergency basis, probably take a week or close to a week to get a aircraft carrier kitted up and ready to shove off. A lot of the crew may not be just sitting around waiting to get an order to, go deploy for 6 months or whatever. They can likely be on leave. They just maybe came in from a tour. Who knows? These guys that have been in for 10, 15 years, they're probably getting, 6, 8 weeks of leave. So they got to activate them, and, the commanders, the captains, these kind of guys, the high-ranking officers have got years, and they get long vacation time. So I have not found out if the 3 aircraft carriers in San Diego shoved off, but yesterday there was reports that they were all loaded up and ready to go. Now, where are they going to go? Are they going to the Middle East, or are they going to Asia Pacific? Let me research real fast and see if they shoved off yet. But you got to remember that there's 1 aircraft carrier in the Middle East now, and there's 1 that just entered the Mediterranean. By now, it probably entered on the way. And there's another one that left Virginia. So there'll be 3 here in a matter of days. Okay, 2 aircraft carriers did leave San Diego already. No, that doesn't count. No, that one of them left on the 13th of September. That's not it. That would be the Carl Vinson. That was a planned patrol. Okay, the Abraham Lincoln left San Diego on the 30th of September. Okay, that would be a pretty recent departure. I would include that in there. But on probably the 29th, we were told there was 3 aircraft carriers ready to go out of San Diego, and apparently one went so far. Okay, so that's another aircraft carrier that became active. So something's going on. The Carl Vinson is floating around somewhere, and now you got this other aircraft carrier. So something's up, okay? And they got 2 sitting there ready to go. The 2 sitting there ready to go might be, because they're in San Diego, ready to go to Asia Pacific, in case China and North Korea start rising up. Now, a French general came out yesterday and said that France, told everybody in France to get ready for the war. It could even start yesterday at night. Now, why is France involved? Well, we'll cover that, okay? And let me go into the live stream and make sure we got ourselves a good live stream. I gotta get out of this. There we go. Looks good. Let me see. Do we got sound? Looks good. Let me see. Yeah, we're good. I've got moderators. That's great. Thank you, moderators. Yeah, Greta and them definitely timed this to come in on Yom Kippur, the rabbinical version of Yom Kippur. That's for sure. Okay, let me put up a quick post, and it's just going to take seconds. Almost done. Okay, let me put this up. And I believe I got it. Okay, so I'm not going to be wishing anybody a happy Yom Kippur because it's not Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is the real holiday, but this is not the date. We're in the 8th month now. Okay. All right, let me do some praise since we're a Bible believing site, Old and New Testament. There is no God like Jehovah. 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 There is no Messiah like Yeshua. 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 Okay, so why would France be saying that war's coming any time now? Well, we got a bifurcation here. That means the road goes into two paths with France. And it could be Iran, because France was one of the three countries, which was UK, Germany, and France, that went and brought the snapback sanctions, got them to return onto Iran, and fought for them in the United Nations and was successful. And the snapback tariffs are in full effect for a few days now. So France could be working with the Donald Trump to attack Iran. Now, yesterday, Trump signed an executive order which wasn't ultra complicated. It basically said anybody attacking the nation of Qatar would be treated as if they attacked the United States. Now, a lot of you are going to go fly off the handle and say that's because Israel attacked the Hamas terrorists in Qatar. All right. That's not what this is about. Okay? Trump knew that Netanyahu was going to do that before Netanyahu did it. Let's not get stupid, okay? And he green-lighted it, okay? Now, let me back that up. After that was over, and he told Qatar that you got to eject out of your country the Hamas leaders that are there if they reject his 21-point peace plan, which was rejected. Okay. What they tried to do with that was run into drag out negotiations. Qatar even said this. Qatar's on the side of Hamas, not Israel, not America. Trump's not smart enough to understand that Hamas is an enemy. It is. He's an infidel country, but he'll learn soon enough. So Qatar is likely going to have to reject these jerks now. But Trump gave him something else. He gave him this executive order that says, if thou shalt attack Qatar, thou shalt be attacking the United States. Now, we know Iran attacked a military facility towards the end of the 12-day war. And Trump said, I believe Trump was absolutely lying. And he said Iran called him up and said, how about 1 o'clock in the morning or 2 o'clock in the morning for the attack? And Trump said, yeah, that's okay. And then he evacuated the soldiers. This is Trump's story. Out of the building, and Iran sent several missiles, more than one. Maybe it was 4. To attack that building, and the building did get attacked, and Trump said all the guys that would be in the building were seeking cover, apparently in a bomb shelter or something, and didn't get hurt. I don't know how true that is. Right after that, the war ended. My opinion of how the war ended was they didn't want Trump beforehand. And they attacked it for real. They may have hurt some soldiers, and Trump's not letting on. I don't know. There could have been an air raid siren because Qatar is loaded with American radar. I don't think even a horsefly flies around there without getting picked up on radar. That's a joke, but there's intensive radar coverage. Very intensive. So they would have picked up the launch from Iran, and there would have been at least seconds, if not, like when we get launches from Hezbollah or Gaza or something like that, they're right on top of us. This is not right on top. They got to cross the water. So they would have, maybe there was, a minute and a half or 2.5 minutes or something like that. I don't know. And they could have sounded an alarm, and the guys bailed out and went into the bomb shelter, and the building got hit, and the bomb shelter would have been basically a basement type thing, I believe. Sometimes they put them in a high rise on the floors. They build a room in the floor out of big, thick, heavy, strong concrete and fortify it and stuff. I don't know. It could have been that way, so they only need a few seconds to get in there. And that could be a very, very real explanation as to why nobody got hurt, because they just maybe needed 10 or 20 seconds to get into the shelter. So it did get Trump ticked off, and I think, in my opinion, Trump got word to the Iranians directly or indirectly that if they didn't cease and desist immediately, he was going to unleash Israel and he was going to join in, and there would be 300 planes bombing them night and day. And I think Trump told them, you could believe me or not believe me, but I'm telling you, one more attack and that's what's happening. And I think they believed him. In addition to the planes bombing them, he would have had his military war vessels shooting all kinds of missiles. There would have been hundreds of big, heavy payload missiles hitting Iran. And he would have called in B-2s, B-1s, B-52s. It would have been a field day. Netanyahu would have been sitting there patting him on the back. Yes, Donald, you're doing the right thing. I know there's opposition, but this is the right thing. Believe me, this was the best thing you could do for America. And he would keep Trump, inflated enough to keep crushing Iran. But it looks like now it's coming. So Trump got Iran to stop. They got scared. But not scared enough. They're watching Trump in Venezuela, and he's punking out. They know he punked out with the Houthis. So now they're wondering, how serious Trump really is, and they're kicking against the UN with the IAEA, International Atomic Energy Administration, or Authority, whatever they call it. They're going against it hard. And a few days ago, the IAEA said they're making uranium at the 90% level for warheads and bombs, if you want to believe that nonsense. And they're basically telling everybody they're going to rebuild their nuclear facilities. If you destroy them, we'll just keep rebuilding them. You can't tell us that we're not allowed to have nukes or nuclear energy, whatever they're talking about. And they're operating in defiance of the sanctions. And I told you how they could beat the sanctions yesterday in a nutshell. India made a concession to Trump and said they would stop buying Russian oil. Instead, they would buy Iranian oil. No, India has to buy oil from somewhere else. So with the sanctions going, India gets Iranian oil. They send their own tanker ships there to load up and haul it back to India, right? That's all they got to do. Now, right now, that would work. And India pays Iran. They tell Iran, here, open up 25 bank accounts in our national bank. And Iran says, okay. And then every time they send a few ships of oil over there, or maybe even one ship, the Indian government transfers Indian rupee currency to Iran inside the Indian bank, and America can't do beans about that. Now, the account doesn't say this is the Iranian bank account to fraud the sanctions. No, it's going to say something, like Patel Motel Association or some stupid thing, right? So then Iran is free to use the money. It can just make the purchase in rupees. So whatever it wants to buy, if it wants to buy raincoats, snow tires, military equipment from other countries, food, it just pays them from the Indian bank account without any issues. And then probably after every payment, they switch to a new bank account, so there's no patterns. So they could even give them 250 corporations. It's an unlimited amount. They don't care. Okay. China, the same thing. China sends tankers or something, and they load up and they bring it to China, and China gives them a bank account in China. Now, China has the same thing with corporations, and they have bank accounts in multiple currencies. So they just conduct business with China. Now, China and India are not under sanctions. Those two make up about 1/3 of the world population. What are they going to sanction them now? See what I'm saying? So that's why Iran's not that impressed with the sanctions. Do you understand? And that's why Trump and his harebrained schemes with sanctions and tariffs is doing nothing but wrecking the economy of America. It's not going to work. The tariffs and the sanctions are not going to, they're two different things. The tariffs are not going to kick in a few months and save the economy of America. It's tanking. It's tanking. Okay? He's killing the American people. Okay? The cost of everything sold has gone up. And when you see this war light up, forget it. Your cost overall, what you're spending in the supermarket, let's stick with that, cumulative is probably going to go up at least 15, if not 20 or 25% over a period of 2 or 3 or 4 weeks, maybe a period of a month, even 6 weeks. Because the transportation of every single thing in that supermarket is driven by gas. container ships, tanker ships, right? Okay. Trains. Tremendous amount of product moves on the railroads, guys. Okay. Railroads are slow, but they're very cost effective. And I used to be in a business where we had a railroad spur and we brought in a lot of products. It was a paper goods business. We had a 50,000 square foot warehouse. I was a manager and I ran the thing and we brought in rail cars full of paper products. And man, they got high ceilings and you could really stuff those railroad cars. So we had our own spur. So what did that mean? When we got a delivery, the railroad, which I think was in San Francisco Southern Pacific, they would bring the railroad car on this spur. A spur is a small piece of track that branches off a more main piece of track that they would push the railroad car or drive it on, and they would line it up with our doors from our warehouse that we could open. Okay, I believe they slid. I can't remember now. I'm not sure. Maybe they opened inside, or I don't remember. But we had big doors, and then we had to take a steel plate and cover the bridge. It was a broad steel plate. It was at least 3 feet wide. It was a meter wide, let's say, is a rough guess, I'd say. And it was about 5 or 6 feet. It was a heavy thing. It was probably 1 inch steel. And we would take forklifts and offload the product off the railroad car. You had to be careful because you were on this plate, but if you fell, you'd be falling 4 feet, which isn't much, and the forklift wouldn't have had enough space to come crashing down on you. I don't think so. You would have been a little busted up. You wouldn't have been. You probably would have just stood up and dusted yourself off. And we used to have usually run 3 or 4 forklifts, 3 a day, and we'd be running forklifts in and out of that railroad car all day for days to offload it. It's a massive amount of stuff you get in there. Where when you're, in my opinion, when you're offloading a 40-foot truck, it goes in hours. This thing would go days. Now, that could have been because the truck is built better for it and it's easier to get in and out, but I don't know. We did the same thing to the truck. The truck would pull up to our loading dock and you had a space. And we usually put a steel plate on there to drive in and out. It was the same thing. Maybe this was a 3 foot drop or something, 3.5. If you fell, I never heard of anybody falling. I did this for quite a while. Nobody fell. I had my own little thing, like a forklift. What it was a an electric cart that they would charge up every night for me, and you stood on it, and you had a handle, and you controlled the speed, and you steered it with that. And I used to, because 52,000 square foot warehouse, you don't want to spend your day walking around looking to see if you have inventory. Some customers saying, "Well, I need this. Do you have it?" And so I could go ask the warehouse workers, but I didn't like doing that all the time because they were, uh, working. So I would go out. I used to keep the thing outside my office. I'd jump on the thing, I guess it went about 10 or 12 miles an hour. And I would get to where, I knew the inventory somewhat. I knew this products were here, and I would take a look and I would get back into the office. Sometimes if one of the good customers had a crisis, I would, and they needed an emergency something, a case of something, so I would have the warehouse guys pull a case and put it in my car, and then I would drive it over there to them. But sometimes that didn't work. Like I had a Porsche 911S, and this was in the late 70s, and you couldn't always get a case in the car, depending on the case, you know. But most of the time you could. And if you didn't, then I'd have to get one of the salesmen or someone else to drive it out there. Um, so anyway, yeah, so the railroad does a lot of movement of goods, believe me. It's more than most people are aware of. And then you have trucks. So a lot of times you'll have a ship will pull in, let's say in Oakland, California, and the stevedores, the longshoremen union will offload the ship, uh, put the stuff on the ground, on in the port, put it on the ground, So there's one crew of people that are taking it off the ship with cranes and different things and dropping it on the ground. And then when it's on the ground, then another crew would pick it up. It would be palletized normally. Another crew would pick it up and load it into a tractor trailer. Maybe the tractor's not on there yet, it's just a trailer. And then a tractor would come hook it up and deliver it. Another way that they could work this is, let's say the ship comes into Oakland in California and the stuff is going to Kansas or something like that. Well, they might not use a truck. They might offload it to the ground, and then they put it in a railroad car, because they had railroad sidings over the port all over the place, load it into a railroad car, run it out to Kansas, and then Kansas would take it by truck and deliver it. So it was all sorts of combinations. And the trains are running on diesel, and the trucks are running on diesel, and the ships are running on diesel. Do you have any idea what that's going to do to yourself in the supermarket? Every item's going to go up a little bit, but it's going to add up like crazy. The same will apply to everything you buy. Clothing, shoes, wood, carpet, anything. Plus home heating oil will go up, plus gasoline from your car is going to go up. And electricity is going to go up. And these factories are going to have to spend a lot more money keeping them warm in the cold months, keeping them air conditioned to some extent in the hot months. And the machinery and all that's going to be running on generators or electricity, and it's going to cost more. Everything's going to go up. It's nuts what's going to happen. I'm telling you, within a month, you'll probably be up 15-20%. So if you're spending $600 a month on groceries, it may go up $120 or $150 a month. And then when you add in your home heating oil and the gas for the car, you might get a bump of another $150. It's really going to kill people. People are at their limit. Okay, Trump has blown it. It's not coming around. People hate America for the tariffs, and he's compelling them into it. He didn't ease them into it. He's hitting them with a iron rod. Okay. So let's take a look at the price of oil and gold and silver right now. Let's see what's going on. I didn't check yet today. It's getting pretty exciting here. All right, I'm checking gold, silver, crude oil, and Brent. I'm getting the high in the last 24 hours, and I'm getting the current real-time trading spot price. It'll take a minute or two for it to pull it up, but it'll get it. Either it stopped work. No, it's running. I gave it a big command, so it's taking a minute or two. Okay, let's get some prices for you. Gold went over 3,900 in the last 24 hours. Gold went to 3,904. It broke 3,900. Let's have a hand for gold. Gold is currently trading at 38.72, so they did push it down. But this means it's prodding and prodding to hit 4,000. Now, 4,000 is what you would call a massive resistance point. Okay, it's going to have trouble getting through it, but it will. A little bit of war, and it'll pass right through, probably pass through 5,000. Okay, silver is down a couple of bucks. They suppressed that. There's not that many people that excited about it. It had a high of 47.78, and it's down to 47.27. Crude is not moving around. It's still in the $62. It's now 62.11. The high was 62.50, and the Brent is at 65.65. So we're not seeing the movement in the oil right now. But I expect a war with Iran, and Iran, well, just a war with Iran is probably going to shove oil to about $85. Not so bad. If Iran shuts the Persian Gulf and the Houthis are getting way more aggressive in the Red Sea and the Sea of Aden and the waterways to the south of Yemen and south of Saudi Arabia, you might easily see 120 and on its way to 200 a barrel. So we got to wait and watch this one, but I guarantee you it's going to go up. And there's people that are talking $300 to $800 a barrel. People that are really involved in commodities for their whole work life or for many, many years. And they're talking about numbers like that. I don't know. I'm thinking 5,000 an ounce for gold is nothing. You might see 7,500 to 10,000 real soon. Now, with those kind of numbers, silver's going to be over 100. If gold goes to 7,500, silver's got to be 100. I mean, I'd be shocked if it was 78 or something like that. Maybe, but I don't think so. It's going to go. I could go to 10,000. Now, if gold's at 10,000, I don't know where silver could be 250. I have no idea. Silver's going to not be worth, 2% of gold. It's going to be more substantial, So if gold was 10,000 an ounce and you said, okay, silver's 10%, that's $1,000. That's a little hard to understand, but 250 I could see. That I could see. But, when you start hitting panic level, it's very difficult to get a feel for what is really happening. Um, It's hard to say. Generally, it's just hard to say. Okay, so we know what's going on there. Let's get back into. Let me see what's going on in our live stream. If you have prayers, requests, thoughts, requests, questions, you can put them up in the chat. I do deal with it. What? Well, it's not the real Yom Kippur because the rabbi's calendar is way off. But what you would say to somebody is Chag Sameach on any of the holidays. Chag Sameach is in English happy holidays or happy holiday. That's what they usually would say. In Yiddish, it would be Yom Tov. Yom is day in Hebrew and Yiddish, and Tov. Yontov. Guten Yontov. They would say good. Yontov is a combination of day and good, so it's a good day, a special day. It doesn't go in English all that great, but that's Yiddish, and they don't do much Yiddish. The ultra Orthodox still use Yiddish. That's probably about it. And I'm old, so I remember the Yiddish. But they, in Hebrew, it's Chag Sameach. That's it. If you go to the Israelis and say Guten Yontov, they'll look at you. A lot of them will smile and they remember their parents and grandparents talking like that. They'll smile. The Russians, if I say that to the Russians, a lot of them will stop and they'll get very friendly with me because they remember mom and dad and grandma and grandpa were doing that, but they don't really understand too much of it. So it's not Yom Kippur though. Okay. You see, the Moedim, the holidays in the Bible, the moon is very important, and in the Bible there's a feast day that recurs 12 times a year. It's when the new moon sliver appears, when it's a new moon, not a full moon, a new moon. And that's a feast day. And the rabbis and the Levites, generally the rabbis, the Pharisees and Sadducees screwed it all up, but the Levites would normally go on the high places in Israel where they had good elevation, unobstructed, and they would look for the moon with the naked eye. They didn't have binoculars back then. They would look for the moon with the naked eye, and when they saw the moon, they would have prepped a fire. Not lit a fire, prepped a fire, so the wood would be stacked. A substantial fire. And when they saw the moon, there would be an impair. So two of them would agree, yeah, we see the moon. And then they'd go light the fire. So in Israel, the other day, the last full moon, a few days ago, was not seen in the Galilee. Couldn't see it. You know, the weather, the clouds, whatever. But it was spotted by multiple people, I think 2 or 3, so at least 2, in Jerusalem. See, so this happens. So the rabbis, or back then the Levites, would light the fire, and then the other Levites around Israel that were watching from high, good vantage points would see it at the same time. Obviously, the moon's rather large, and they would light their fire, or if they didn't, they would see the fire or fires being lit by the other Levites, they would light their fire. So the people all throughout Israel, in a matter of moments of the spotting of the moon, would know the new moon was seen and it would be a feast day, and then they would fire up a big meal. Okay, it's not a Shabbat day, so getting in the kitchen and cooking up a big meal is not prohibited. It's a feast day. Now, some people would maybe say, oh, we'll have sashimi. We don't have to cook it. We'll just start slicing the salmon and, put it on rice or some more crackers. But I mean, you could have yourself, you could go make yourself a really big meal and have yourself a nice feast day. Me and my wife did that a few times. Um, so if I go to Google and I put in Yom Kippur 2029 or 2033, it'll tell me, according to the rabbis, when it appears. But you can't do that because you don't know how the spotting of the new moon is going to run until it happens. So you can't biblically create a calendar like a farmer's almanac. That's not the Bible. That's something else. You can't do it. Think about it. Makes sense. You'll figure it out. If you don't, I mean, it's simple. It doesn't work. I'm going to put my air conditioning up. Get you on the warm side here. I'm getting a lot of dialogue from people about coming to Israel now. And, well, I think some of you people that have the true gospel and walk in it are going to be coming here real soon, probably before the next Exodus, probably in timing with Elijah working with the Levites in Malachi 3 with the next temple coming down from heaven. It doesn't get built. It comes down from heaven. If you read Ezekiel 37, the last 3 verses, you get the idea. And that's not New Jerusalem. I know the difference. And the ultra-Orthodox, and a lot of the Orthodox too in Israel, understand that the next temple comes down from heaven, and that's why they never built the temple. The church is not aware of this, or if they are, they won't tell you. So what I do is basically out of the Bible, and a lot of people reject me a lot, okay? For every person that's walking in the true gospel, with this channel in our group, there's probably 25 that have rejected it over the years. They don't have any biblical basis to reject it because it's all in the Bible. They just don't like it. And it makes them nervous and upset. And they're not rejecting me. They're rejecting the Bible because I do everything out of the scriptures. So that's what they're rejecting. Okay. We got a prayer request. For SB Sierra Bravo, but the mother of SB Sierra Bravo, the mother of SB Sierra Bravo's mother, is selling an asset, and we want prayer that the mother gets a good fair price for this asset they're selling, and also that SB's mother has straight stamina and endurance and is not under the influence of any witchcraft or sorcery or spells, enchantments, and has no demons. Okay, so I will do a prayer and you can agree. My Heavenly Father, B'Shem Yeshua HaMashiach, my Heavenly Father Jehovah, in the name of Yeshua HaMashiach, I come to you with this prayer for SB's mother, that SB's mother would have strength, stamina, and endurance, and there would be no demons in SB's mother. If there's any demons in SB's mother, I command them out, never to return again right now, depart. And there, I also cancel and make null and void any and all witchcraft, sorcery, spells, enchantments designed to target SB's mother, and that SB's mother has success in getting a fair price for selling this asset. And I submit all this to you, my Heavenly Father, B'Shem Yeshua HaMashiach, and you guys that are true believers can, of course, join in and should make it more effective, I believe. Okay. What's going on? Well, I'll deal with it later. All right. The churchianity people never teach binding and loosing and agreeing. Where two or more of you agree, it shall be done by my Father in heaven. When two or more are gathered together, there I am in the midst. They tell you that happens in the church. I don't think so. If it did, there wouldn't be any demons in the church, and they're not going to do that. So they don't teach it. They don't practice it. I mean, they tell the people, go pray. But they're in sin meeting in the church. It says if you're going to do seditions, which is divisions, which is a denomination, you're in sin, and that's what the churches are, denominations. And then it also says, this is in Galatians 5, verses 19 to 21. If you do variants, which they do with different doctrinal statements that vary, they're pre-trib, mid-trib, post-trib, amillennial, no pray in tongues, spritz baptism in water, immersion baptism in water, house church, no house church, denomination, no denomination. I mean, it's a joke. They got so many different doctrines and different denominations. It's a sin. It says that you will not enter the kingdom of heaven if you do these things, yet they do them. They don't care about the scriptures. Are they really believers? Are they real believers? Do you care about the scriptures? How can you be a real believer if you don't care about the scriptures? It's kind of interesting conversation you're never going to have in the church. A senior Hamas official said to the British Broadcasting Company, BBC, we will respond negatively to the Trump plan. We are not prepared to allow an international force in Gaza, so in other words, they're not ruling, and to disarm. Now, some of the Arab states like Qatar and Egypt said they liked Trump's plan, but what they didn't tell you is they took Trump's original plan and modified it and then said they liked it. What liars. So is this going anywhere with Hamas? No. What did they try to do? They tried to drag it out with negotiations. They were saying, well, we got to read this and study it. You know, this is the standard Muslim terrorist approach. Let's drag it out. So when they start with negotiations, they say, well, we're not comfortable negotiating under duress with bombings from Israel. So if they stop the attacks, we'll continue negotiations. In the meanwhile, they keep trying to rebuild and get missiles and attack us. So that's all they're trying to do. They're not going to accept it. The plan involves Hamas doesn't rule, they disarm, they got to give all the hostages back first. And it doesn't seem to say that they have to leave Gaza now, but they're not going to stay there. They're not going to do it. It's not going to happen. But now you have to understand that the Flotilla thing is dead. It didn't help them. They were hoping to get some sort of buy some time with that or something. Didn't do them anything. Didn't help. Okay. So Italy actually did come out and tell the Flotilla people that they're out in left field, knock it off. And they said that the Pope guy will, make sure that the humanitarian aid gets safely into Gaza, so you don't have to worry about it. And they ignored that. That's not what they're about. This was not about humanitarian aid. So back to Trump signing the executive order, if you attack Qatar, you're attacking America. That was to stop Iran from attacking Qatar. Trump's putting the tanker aircraft, I think over 30 of them, inside Qatar, plus fighter jets, F-22, F-15, F-16, F-35, all in Qatar. So if Iran attacks Qatar, they basically attacked America, which means Trump technically doesn't have to go to Congress to get a declaration of war against Iran, because he sort of has built a house of cards here with his executive order and use that without having to go to Congress. And Congress will probably protest his use of it, but it'll be too late. And it's also a scare tactic to Iran. Okay? Will it work? I doubt it. You don't scare Iran very readily because they're completely out of their minds. They're out of their tree. They're nuts. You're not scaring crazy people. Did Hitler get scared? No. The United States will view any armed attack on the territory, sovereignty, or critical infrastructure of the state of Qatar as a threat to the people and security of the United States. In the event of such an attack, the United States will take all lawful, appropriate measures, including diplomatic, economic, and if necessary, military, to protect the interests of the United States and the state of Qatar and to restore peace. Yeah, it, it's kind of iffy what he'll do. Will it really be legal action that he could declare war on Iran for attacking Qatar, not America? I don't know. I don't think very many people know. It's probably unprecedented in that it never happened before with an executive order. I don't know. Trump would never go this far to stop Israel. It's not about Israel. He just tells Israel won't do it again. Israel won't do it again. It's not about Israel. Somebody will say, well, maybe it is about Israel because you know, it gives Qatar more confidence that Trump won't lose his patience with them. And it means Israel won't be doing that again, but I don't think so. And I think they're going to have to kick the Hamas leaders, the real leaders, out of Qatar because they're not allowing hostages to come back and not signing a ceasefire with Trump's deal. So Spain and Italy both said that the flotilla should turn back. But Turkey said Israel are terrorists for stopping the flotilla, but they didn't do anything with their warships. Wildfires across Washington state have burned more than 237,000 acres and counting, and there are 11 major wildfires burning now in the state of Washington. People are not aware of the fires, and that's a means of destruction of the daughter of Babylon. It's not a warning sign, it's the beginning of the destruction. The Hamas was trying a game in Gaza against our soldiers. There was a guy, one of Hamas he probably had decent English or he might have good Hebrew, and he was crying out in Hebrew, "I'm one of the hostages, help me," to try to get the soldiers to come out and expose themselves. So he actually was disguised to look like a hostage, and he attempted to lure Israeli soldiers into a possible trap. This happened on Monday. He was waving a white flag in the direction of the Israeli soldiers, calling for help. He was trying to make them think he was a hostage. So the soldiers didn't like the smell of this, because they probably asked him what his name was, and the guy didn't know, and if he did know the name, then they would probably ask what his mother's name is, and, you know, other information. It didn't work. They didn't get anywhere. In World War II, the Japanese would do this a lot. And the Vietnamese, too, in the Vietnam War, and after a battlefield when they was dead and wounded. And the Americans were in their encampment. The Vietnamese would cry out, "Help me, it's Johnny, help me, help me." You know, and it would go on all night long. Help, it's Johnny. Or they wouldn't even use a name. And, you know, if they went out to help, they would get shot. And they would be listening all night to this guy impersonating being a wounded American soldier. And it wasn't the case. World War II, the Japanese did this. They did extensive searches, and they came up with nothing. And it doesn't sound like they got a hostage or anything. It was a ploy of theirs. So they're using white flags to ambush soldiers. See what they're like, you know? I was a little surprised to learn they were sinking the boats of the flotilla. They get the occupants of the boats offloaded onto a Navy warship, and then they sink it. I imagine they probably fire one or two artillery shells into it from the boats, maybe a 30 millimeter gun, and give it a burst of a few rounds, and it sinks. Colombia, the country, has severed its relationship with Israel, diplomatic relations, following the stopping the flotilla. See, anti-Semitism, anti-Israel is on the rise like 1939, Europe with Hitler. There's anti-Israel protesters gathering at train stations in Italy to block the tracks. In other words, to probably shut down people going to work with commuter trains. over what's going on because the Italian government took a stand against the protesters. See, that's how they work. So they did this, and it was, this plan started decades ago with bringing Muslims into the various countries. France filled up with Muslims from Africa back in the 80s even. They're really full of Muslims over there. So Iran knows there's an attack coming. Did Iran say we're negotiating to prevent such an attack? No. They did not say anything like that. When does it look like this attack will happen? I think you've got a minimum of a week. You might have 2 to 3 weeks. You've got a lot of equipment and buildup that America's going to want before it goes. More aircraft carriers, more ships. Not going to happen so quick. Poland just scrambled some F-16s that had weapons, various missiles, to intercept 2 Shahed drones heading towards Polish territory. See, so something could happen in Europe too. It could be both things are going to go down. If France is going after Iran, so is Germany and the UK. If France is going after Russia, you would have to believe America and other countries are going after Russia too, numerous countries. Is it possible they're trying to go after both? Yeah. The fear might be when they engage Iran, and they're also going to engage Yemen, that Russia may take that as an opportunity to start attacking NATO countries. It's a very hard analysis. What are they going after? Well, Russia did not say it's imminent they're going to be attacked. They said it's imminent Iran's going to be attacked. Now, France said they're going to be war any day now. Did France say they were going to be attacked? No. Could Iran attack France? Not easily. They could launch some drones and missiles there, but it would be an immature attack. It wouldn't do much. I'll be right back. Take a fast break. I don't think it would do much. All right, let's try to get a breakdown of why I think it's really Iran that's going to get hit, not Russia. Because their tool to hit Russia is not themselves, it's Ukraine. And Trump recently said he's going to be giving Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine, making a $50 or $60 billion deal with them, and includes giving them Tomahawks. And allowing them to strike deeper into Russia. With the Tomahawks, they can go extremely deep, beyond Moscow and St. Petersburg. So what Ukraine will do, consistent with Trump's anti-BRICS policy, is attack more oil refineries, as well as military bases and drone and missile factories and fuel depots for the military and military airports and equipment. But there'll be a significant emphasis on the refineries. Now, Russia already had to suspend export of processed oil, gasoline, because they don't have enough. So, Ukraine hitting more and more oil refineries will impede Russia supplying BRICS with oil that's traded not on the euro, not on the dollar. On the dollar is what Trump's concerned with. Okay? So, that stops BRICS. Trump really doesn't care if countries start selling rice and wheat and grain and oranges and tomatoes off the US dollar. He doesn't want it, but he's not that upset about it. Oil, yeah, that's very big dollars. Now, who else are the big players in BRICS that sell oil? Iran. He can't really control Russia, and he can't really control Iran. Now, he has a proxy in Europe called Ukraine to attack Russia, and Trump has a proxy in the Middle East called Israel to attack Iran. Just like Trump doesn't want to see Ukraine get overrun, he doesn't want to see Israel get overrun or destroyed. So there's a lot of military assets here to back up Israel. Because Iran can do what? Iran could structure this so it backfires on Trump. How would that work? Iran has thousands of missiles. Not that many that are going to go to Israel. But when you're talking about hitting Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, UAE, and Jordan, they got a lot of missiles. They could launch at these places off of boats in the Persian Gulf that are disguised to look like container ships and tanker ships, and the tanker ships could launch drones, and the container ships open up the roof of the container and they're firing missiles out of the containers. And they could be floating 25 miles or 35 miles off the coast of these countries, and they don't need real sophisticated missiles. So they swarm attack with drones and missiles. And these countries aren't like Israel. They don't have such good defenses. And what do they attack? Oil refineries. What does that do? It means they're in a better position to sell oil at a higher price off the US dollar. How can they do that? Well, they just tell the customer to buy the oil through their Chinese bank account. That's all. So Trump has to watch that. They could also attack the American military bases in Kuwait, of which he's got about 5,000 soldiers. Bahrain and Qatar, where there's a few thousand of those added together, probably at least 5,000. UAE, maybe 2,500 or so in there. Oman, which is in Iran's pocket, there's no American bases there that I know of. Jordan, where there might be 10,000 American soldiers. And Syria, a few hundred. Iraq, nothing anymore. No, there's something there, I think. Yeah, but it's small. Hundreds. Turkey, I wouldn't count. Lebanon, nothing. Israel, nothing. And Saudi Arabia, at least 5,000 or 10,000. So they don't want to get attacked. America doesn't want that. But how do you tell Iran, listen, you just shut up and tolerate our bombings while we destroy your country and overthrow your regime, and don't retaliate, because if you retaliate, we'll make it worse. Well, how do you do that? Well, I don't think you can. You know? So the way Iran is likely going to play the move with the sanctions, the snapback sanctions, is block the Persian Gulf. They announced they would. Trump is gearing up. One reason is to let them know that if they block the Persian Gulf, they're going to get swarm attacked. But again, you're not going to scare Iran because they think Trump is a punk and won't go to war, period. So they will test them. If it's just him going to war, I don't think he will. But if he has France, the UK, and Germany, and probably Italy behind him, plus Israel, he'll go to war then. And the Houthis got to go too, because they're going to close the waterways also with Iran. And they can knock out about 35-40% of the world's economy with those two waterways combined. So other countries will join in with Trump. Iran's not much of a challenge. They don't have an air force and they don't have a navy. They got a hybrid nonsense navy. they're dangerous, but it's not like fighting Turkey or Russia, which is really dangerous, uh, because they have, over 100 warships and they got hundreds of aircraft, and you got to watch yourself. Now they're not that dangerous, but they're dangerous enough where you don't want to, have a war with them. The bad news with Iran is they could reach many countries in Europe with their missiles and drones. And since the 12-day war was over in June, you better believe Iran's been manufacturing missiles like crazy. Now, they're mentally ill. Okay? That's one good way to put it. The leaders know that the Islam story isn't real, and they don't really believe it. It's just for the people, but they lie so much, they start believing their own lies. And I don't know what Russia's going to do to help them, if anything. Russia flying the drones into the European countries and NATO countries is being dealt with by putting jets in these countries to blow the drones out of the air, which jets and even helicopters can do with air-to-air missiles, which are little, usually, like a 3-inch or so missile that doesn't have a very long range. And they identify the drone with their radar. Drones are slow movers where they go 60, 70 miles an hour or something like that. The planes get a lock on it, and then they fire these short range small rockets that hit the drone, and the drone, of course, crashes. So that's how they're defending against the drones. And these drones were not aggressive attack drones that were doing surveillance, which scared and irritated the countries involved. But it would have been worse if they were attacking, drones. They're not attack drones. So I'm not that high on, France attacking Russia and Italy and Germany and, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Norway, Sweden, Poland, and Romania, and all of them turning and attacking Russia. Could they do it? Yeah. Would they win? I think so. What does Trump really want with Russia? He wants Russia to basically drop the BRICS thing, buy and sell oil on the US dollar and also the natural gas. Quit trying to push anybody around militarily and just mind your own business and try to put a new Buick inside everybody's garage in Russia or something like that, And then we'll be friends. And would Would Trump help Putin put a new car in every garage in Russia? Oh, 100%. Would Trump be able to do it effectively? If God let him, yeah. Is this anything that's going to happen? No chance. Not a chance. So I don't think we're going to see a big attack on Russia. Uh, Trump might be wanting to bring equipment in, but you see, if it was Russia that he was concerned with, he wouldn't be bringing the equipment into the Middle East. It doesn't add up. He's a little worried about Russia, but I think it's a little worried. Does that mean Russia won't attack? No. No. I don't know what Russia's going to do. Russia doesn't have a good choice. The only choice, this so-called axis of evil, as they like to call it, but both sides are evil, which is North Korea, China, Iran, Russia, and may as well throw Belarus in. The only chance they really have is if they all attack America at the same time. That's really my summary of what I see here, but I do see an attack on Iran imminent. Remember, Russia said there's an attack on Iran imminent. He didn't say himself. He would have if it was the case. And he would be rallying some of the stand countries and things like that. You know, Belarus has still not been deployed in the war, and they got missiles on their borders pointed at other countries like Poland, Orishnikovs. So they put the missiles probably, a few miles inside Belarus, and these are fast movers, you know, hypersonic, and they fire those up, and they're going to hit the target in probably under a minute, maybe 30 seconds. So the response time is going to be pathetic. They're not going to have time to go take shelter. So we wait and we watch. I don't think we got a long wait, and I think we got a complication with Iran, and that's called Hamas. Now, I think till America gets their other aircraft carriers here with their escort vessels, you probably have about 10 days. Maybe, I don't think it's going to be in a week. It could be, but I'm not looking at a week. Unless Iran says, oh, we better strike now and do a preemptive attack. If we wait, America's going to have all these aircraft carriers and everything else. And, let's say an aircraft carrier, it could have 90 planes, let's say 80. So they have 3 aircraft carriers here, that's 240 planes. Israel usually can throw 100 planes in, that's 340, and America's got other planes here. But at 340 planes, you're talking about annihilating Iran in days. Add on missile attacks from the Navy ships America has here that are precision accurate, smart missiles that will hit their targets. And what I mean, they're going to pound Iran, but Iran's got some advantages. They got these missile cities that are put inside of mountains, and they're very hard to blow up. So there's a lot of trouble fighting Iran. It's not so simple. There's difficulties. You understand? They're difficult to blow up stuff. Khomeini's probably going to be at least 150 feet under the ground, maybe 300 or 400 feet. So how are you going to hit him? Now, since the June attack, the 12-day attack, America may have built 25 massive bunker buster bombs. Huge things, maybe a new hybrid, maybe a 12,000 pounder, I don't know. And these things could be dropped on some facilities and may cave them in, I don't know. Now, there's no B-1 and B-2 bombers in the theater here, and that I know of, and that could be because we're not ready yet. They may just bring those in the last minute because they don't want to run a chance of them getting blown up. It's very interesting times. Hamas is not going for the peace deal that Trump came up with. So Netanyahu agreed to it. Netanyahu got some real modifications from Trump and agreed to it, and Hamas isn't interested in it. And they're not giving the hostages back. Hamas doesn't think Israel's really going to go do what it's going to do. The only thing that's going to be able to save Hamas is if North Korea, China, Iran, Russia, Belarus rise up at the same time. Even then, I don't think it'll save Hamas. Now, Yemen's going to go with Iran because Yemen will definitely attack Saudi Arabia oil, and Yemen will probably attack in Jordan as well if Jordan doesn't go with Iran. So Yemen's going to go. Saudi Arabia is not going to side with Iran, and Saudi Arabia and Yemen are going to get into it, and they're going to hit the Aramco facility and try to knock it out of action for 6 months or a year. And that alone is going to spike oil prices. Iran's vengeance is spiking oil prices. Is Israel going to get involved with opening the Straits of Hormuz if Iran closes them? No. There's not a lot Israel can do. It's hard for Israel to get over there. They do have war boats, but so does America. Israel's not going to play that game. If they're going to attack Iran's warships, they're going to take them out from the air. Or they're not going to lose planes. They'll use F-35s that the warships are not going to be able to track and launch, anti-aircraft weapons at. And they're going to blow the bejeebus off of the Iranian go-fast boats and stuff like that. It's a problem. Now, the wild card here is, does Iran and the Houthis and the Hamas and the Hezbollah have sleeper agents in America? The answer to that, in my opinion, is 99.99%. There's always a chance I could be wrong, but I would say, and will they launch them? I think so. What will Trump do? Trump is weak, mentally and otherwise, and he'll try to bring everything down. So I think you probably have a 2 to 3 week wait, unless Iran or Russia decides they're better off with a preemptive attack, because they'll get to create more damage. What would a preemptive attack want to do? It would want to get Trump disgusted with what's happening and want to bring it to an end so he can make money. So then Trump settles out with Iran and gives him a sweetheart deal and throws Israel under the bus, but not so much. Remember, he can't do that much with Iran. Iran's dangerous because of the BRICS. They're working hard to make this payment system very functional and trade oil all around the globe without using the US dollar, which reduces the demand for the US dollar. If Iran could get away with it and Russia could get away with it, the UAE is already in BRICS, they'll side with it. Then Saudi Arabia would give up, and then they go. Then Jordan goes. And you got a massive amount of oil and natural gas getting sold, not on the US dollar, and the demand for the dollar will go down. And instead of the euro being worth $1.13, the euro will be worth $1.66. The UK pound will be worth $2. Things will be very difficult in America. The only thing that'll pick up in America is tourism, because the people from the other countries there, the dollar will be so cheap, vacations will be cheap, and they'll want to go over there and go to Disney and see Las Vegas and stuff like that. By the way, we did spiritual warfare against Las Vegas months ago, and I understand now they're doing so bad. It's like Disney. We also did spiritual warfare against Disney World and all the Disneys. But back to Las Vegas, it's so bad there that the casinos are not doing good at all. The hotels are not doing good. People that used to work for the casinos and the hotels are homeless now. And it's like the streets are very deserted, like Disney World in Orlando is very deserted. Now, they're saying the casinos in Vegas are doing bad because they got away from their model of cheap hotels and cheap food, so you gamble, also cheap shows. But guys, they had that model of high price food and high price hotels and high price shows for at least 10 or 12 years now, maybe 15 years. Why now? See? And the cruise ships went to this lunatic model right after COVID. When COVID hit, the cruise ships were scared and they came up with really cheap pricing, where you were able to take a 1 week cruise for as little as $300 to the Caribbean, right? And that would be all your food, all your entertainment. It would probably be all your soft drinks, but it wouldn't be soda. Soft drinks would be juice, coffee, tea, water. Not bottled water. And you had to pay tips on top of that. And alternative dining was extra. And taking tours at the stops was extra, and buying anything was extra. But all your shows, all your room service back then, I believe, and your meals at the buffet or the sit down or numerous other restaurants they had you didn't have to pay extra for were included. So you could live on the cruise ship awfully cheap. People didn't want to go. They were nervous about COVID. They didn't want to let you on the ship unless you were vaccinated. Then they wanted you running around with a mask on in any public space and washing your hands all over the place. So the cruise was not a desirable thing. But after the COVID got over, they started right away escalating their prices. And the cruise industry is bigger than Vegas, okay? It's massive industry. I think it's bigger than Vegas, or maybe it's comparable, but in terms of dollars, it's huge, okay? Vegas is rather large too. They're both big, probably a fairer way of looking at it. So they started charging for room service. They started when I used to go cruising when I was in the world, which was up until the very early 2000s, the alternative restaurants were fantastic, and they were $25 a head. Now some of them are $100 a head. They're at least 50 a head, or 75. So for two people, it's 150 for alternative dining. Who the heck wants to do that? You know, the regular food's pretty darn good. Now, it used to be in most of the good cruises, if you didn't like the menu selection for dinner, they had alternative every day. They had an alternative meal. Like on the better lines, like Celebrity, you were able to get a fillet, like a ribeye or a T-bone steak, or a salmon fillet and chicken, I think. Had 3 or 4 things you could get. So if you didn't like the regular meal selections, which are usually about 5 or 6, you could get a nice piece of salmon or a steak. No extra charge. Now they still do that, but they charge you an extra $15 or $20. See, they started nickel and diming you to death. And the price of the cruises is through the roof. It used to be that in the early 2000s, a balcony cabin on a nice cruise ship like Princess or Royal Caribbean, not Carnival, better than Carnival, was about $3,500 for a week for 2 people. Where if you go back into the late 1998 or something like that, they were even like 18, 2200 for the same thing. A suite was for 2, maybe 3,000 back then. So they jacked their prices up some, consistent with them building new cruise ships that were bigger and had more attractions. Where the cruise industry got weird was the cruise ships in the 90s were carrying about 1,500 people, and the crew would be anywhere from 1,000 to 1,200. And they were smaller boats, and they didn't have these great amenities. So what did they have? They had a ton of cabins that had a window that didn't open. Usually it was a big round window. And sometimes, frequently, you had 2 of those. So you would have a lot of daylight in the cabin, and you wouldn't get weird without having any daylight in your room in the morning. Where the inside cabins, you get weird. It throws your clock off. I don't ever suggest those. And they're smaller. And what happens in my experience and experiences of other people is you don't get up in the morning. I mean, you sleep in till 9, 10 o'clock instead of getting up at 6 or something, you know? You oversleep. They're very quiet, and they're dark as all get up, pitch black. So you got to watch yourself with that. Now they got new things. They got a phony window on them, which is basically a television. And they'll have cameras. You could set what you want this you know, it'd be like, 50, 60-inch screen in your cabin. And you can watch movies and things like that on that, of course. But it also they'll have a camera showing you the ocean from the side of the ship, the back of the ship, or the front of the ship. So you could put it wherever you want. And when you're in the cabin, you're going to have some of that artificial light, which ain't the same thing. There's no UV in it, so it's not the same. So anyway, the ships back then would not have water slides, or if they did, they had one junky one, usually nothing. They had a good amount of jacuzzis. They had a kids area with a kids pool with sprinklers and stuff. And the kids would like it. And they had regular pool, one or two of those, and an indoor pool sometimes. They had a gym that was usually okay. They had that was the deck. It had a running, jogging, walking track. It had they would have golf driving range that was like computer. We actually drove a golf ball and it got hit by a net. It used to be years ago you had skeet shooting on the boat. But could you imagine that today? The terrorists get the shotgun and say, okay, I'm hijacking the boat. I mean, it was shooting real shotgun shells. That was in the 70s. That was a big thing, doing skeet shooting. And then you'd have music on the deck, Lido deck, they called it, the main deck. You'd have food there, free food. And you had junk. You had hamburgers, pizza, hot dogs typically, French fries occasionally. You had an ice cream machine, it was free, and you had, juice and coffee and tea and water and, like not bottled water they got, which was desalinated water. And you had the lounge chairs, and you'd lay out in the sun or go dip in the pool or the jacuzzi. And then you could walk inside. On the Lido deck level, there was usually a buffet of some sort, but they didn't want you going in with a bathing suit. They wanted you putting something over the bathing suit usually, so it wasn't that big a deal. And then they had the show, and they had a few bars with comedians or piano or 2 or 3 piece, orchestra, a little small group of musicians playing or something. And at the Lido deck by the pool, they had live music a lot of times, and they'd organize contests like belly whopping in the pool and, different games they played, and the kids had a camp. Okay, it was nothing like it is with the big ships today. That was what the cruising was like, and the crew, the food guys mostly came from Nassau, sometimes Jamaica, mostly Nassau, Bahamas, and they had good English. They weren't from Russia or other places, and they had good English, and they were funny, and you could kid around with them, and they understood the American culture, and they were really good guys. And like once I said to the guy, what's it like working on Christmas? He says, oh, it's nice for the passengers, it stinks for the crew. And I said, could I order more than one main dish? He says, you could order as many as you want, but I can only bring one at a time. Like, okay. And I would always tip them very well. They were fun. They would, you could talk to them. But then they started putting people in from Slovakia and other crazy countries where they had very pathetic, poor English, if any, and they had no idea of the culture, and you couldn't really get along with them very easily or at all. The they started paying these guys worse, and the people from Nassau, Bahamas, that had been doing this for many years just stopped working there. I don't know, they didn't want to hire them, or they didn't want to work there, and they started getting people to work cheaper, and it was not fun, you know. I used to get on and I'd tell the guy, hey, I want, Evian bottled water in the cabin, the guy for the cabin. I want this, I want that. And I'd say to the guy, here's the normal tip up front. And if you take care of me good at the end, I'll give you the same amount again. And they'd look at me, they never heard stuff like that. So I said, okay. And then, like on the last day, they would 99.99% do a great job. I gave them the rest of the money, and then they give me special treatment where I could get off the boat before other people and stuff like that. Um, that was the Nassau guys, Jamaica too, I think. They were okay people. I mean, they got away from that. It was terrible. When they got Filipino people that are really not bad, but they don't kid around with you. You're the king and they're the serf. They're afraid. Uh, what the Nassau guys would do is they would work for some years on the cruise ships, and of course you don't spend any money. They wouldn't have to pay any taxes to Nassau, and they didn't spend any money on food or rent or anything or a car. So the money was all getting saved. I mean, what do you got to spend on a cruise ship? You got to buy toiletries. Every now and then you get off the boat and go buy a meal on shore. You're probably banking 80, 90% of your money. So they'd send it home to their family if they had a family, but a lot of them didn't. And they would save up and buy a business or buy a house or buy rental houses after several years, and they would kick back. They had a way to go. So they worked 5 or 7 years, and then they were set. They set themselves up. But the cruise industry got away from these people. They wanted cheaper people. And the Russians and Eastern European countries, they don't adapt well at all to the cruise. They're not the same. It's never been the same. Part of it was the guys waiting on you in the dining room, and the room stewards were fun. And they knew stuff like, hey, what do I do at this port? And they'd say, oh, don't do that. It's stupid. Do this. Or they say, it all stinks. Don't waste your money. They would tell you what's going on. Where do I go shopping? I want to buy a hat, or I want to buy sunglasses, or I want, go here, go there. Because for years they've been going to the same ports. Right? They killed it with their cheapness. So anyway, then they got these new boats that have up to 5,000 or 6,000 passengers on them, and the ratio of crew members to passengers got much lower. So the level of service on the cruise ship is junk. And they loaded it up with amenities, like inside the cruise ship they got these big walkways that probably 600-800 feet long, and you think you're walking in a street. They have street lamps, and when you look up, usually that's around deck 3 or 4. You look up, you got about 10 decks over you, 12 decks sometimes or more. And they have antique cars they park on this walkway as an exhibit. And it's full of, they make it look like shops, stores, as if you were in a mall or something. And in addition to nonstop shops, they have people with tables out in the walking area. The place is about 25, 30 feet wide and maybe even 40 feet. Yeah, it's pretty wide. These big boats are 120 feet wide or so. And they have people selling merchandise on tables, junk. Uh, and then you have all the shops, they're selling you clothing, purses, liquor, tourist items, and then there's lots of different bars, wine bars, beer bars, and then they usually have a pizza joint with pastries, and that's free. And they have an ice cream station where you get soft ice cream all you want. And they normally have little, duets or quartets of, classical music playing. You could sit and have a coffee or espresso or cafe latte or whatever and listen to them and watch the people walk by. My wife and I used to like to do that. And that's all new that you didn't have on the other boats, okay? Then, they always had the gambling casinos, but we never bothered with that. They cheat. It's a joke. What do you want to, you just throw your money overboard. Then we went to what they started on the top deck. They put water slides in, all different levels of water slides. They got some where you go down like this for people that like to, try God and act like, get, near-death experiences. And then they got more gradual ones that twist around, and they got some for little kids. And then you have your swimming pools, indoor or outdoor. A lot of times the outdoor pool is the indoor pool because they have a canopy that can cover the area with. But usually there's two pools. Then they have the jacuzzis, and they have the lounge chairs, and they got a lot of free food choices there, much more than the old ships. You could get sandwiches, you could get Chinese, you could get sushi, not really great sushi, but sushi. A lot of this for free, and then they have stuff they'll sell you, like cool burgers and thick shakes and other things. Some of it you have to pay for and some you don't, probably half and half. So they try to, and it's all cheap food, so they try to get you to fill up on the cheap food so you don't eat a lot of food when you go for the big meals. So they're very happy to see you fill up on pizza and hamburgers and hot dogs and French fries and ice cream. Then they have for the kids water sprinklers and stuff. Then they'll have, now these boats the older boats were 70,000 tons, was about what they were when I was going on them, and now the big boats are even over 200,000 or 200,000 tons. So they're huge. So you have basketball courts on that big deck. You have miniature golf. Some of them have a go-kart track. Literally. And they got ping pong tables. And they have a rock climbing wall. And then they have zip lines over the boat for people that like to scare themselves. And then they got these things that you sit inside a little cabin thing, maybe 12 or 18 people or 20. and it lifts you up and moves you out over the water while the boat's moving, so to scare you. Then they got a bar on the side of the boat that very slowly goes up and down, and people get on and get off at the different decks. I think they serve food in that thing too. So you're eating out over the water, literally. Then they have ice skating where they have shows and you could go ice skating in there. Then they have a photo shop where the people on the boat are taking your picture constantly all over the place. And then if you want to buy the picture, you go show up there and you pick it out and buy it. If you don't, you don't have to buy it. What did I leave out? Oh, they'll have a movie theater and they show movies up at the top deck at night and they give popcorn. So you use the deck chairs and you lay out there and you watch. They got a huge, like 120-foot movie screen, a huge screen with sound and everything. And it's really good. They probably spent $1 million on these screens or more. Really good. And some of them have an inside movie theater that it used to exist on some of the older boats. They had it. Disney had it on their older boats, which go back to the 90s. They had it. What else? What else did they do? They have these gardens there on the outside. Well, it's not. It's like in the atrium. It's inside the boat. Maybe there's 8 or 10 decks higher, and then it's all open, so you got fresh air. And when it rains, it'll rain in there. And it's a garden with lots of real living plants. Okay, and you could sit there and walk through there, and they have a merry-go-round and some little other attractions, and you could sit there and get coffee or alcohol and watch people walk, or you can just walk through. That's something else they got. So it's like you're on a boat and it's like you're in a park. So they got all these things. I can't remember everything else. They always had a medical facility with at least one doctor. On these big boats, they have 2 or 3 doctors, a few nurses, and they'd probably have maybe 6 or 8 beds where they could keep people. So most of the time, the people they're keeping there fell on the steps and they got a sprained ankle, so they keep them for a day or two with their leg up in the air or something. Somebody might be seriously ill, but if they're seriously ill, they try to get them off the boat for help. Keeping them on the boat like that is usually for trauma where they're going to recover in a day or two. They hurt their back maybe, or who knows what. I was on a boat where they had where they changed the boat. What do they call that? Where somebody has to go every other day and get their blood run through a machine. I forgot what you call it. That's what happens when you live in Israel. You don't use these words. But I think it's for their kidneys or their liver or something, and they did that. Dialysis. They did dialysis on the boat. And that's, so what they did is these big boats are so packed that when you want to go on a water slide or climb the rock climbing wall or something like that, you might have to wait 45 minutes. Who wants to do that? The kids don't care. They get online, they wait 45 minutes, they talk to their friends, and they go on the water slide, and then they go back and wait online again. They'll just keep doing it all day. They also have these things where it's a pool with high pressure water and you get on a surfboard if you can and try to stand up and see if you could surf. And they charge for these things now. They charge for the water slides. They charge for the zip line. They're charging for everything. and they're charging a fortune to go to the alternative dining. And the regular food's still good, but they're charging a fortune. Then they're charging people for the pool for getting a cabana, which is a little tent thing, your own little area with a few shea lounges, chairs, and tables, and you could close it if you want, or keep it open so you're out of the sun and you're outside. And it'd probably be very useful if you had small children because you could bring them in there for a nap. But you could also do that in the cabin. And they're getting hundreds of dollars. Like some of them are $300 a day, some of them are $500 to $600 a day to rent the cabin for the day. You see, they got greedy. They charge for room service. Some of them charge for the item. Some of them just charge you, I don't know, it's $5 or $6 or $7 for the delivery. The food is free, it's just a flat charge. So I used to use the room service when it was all free. I would tip them. I usually had cash. I'd give them some cash. And I would tip them, and I would get cheese. They had a cheese and fruit plate. I would get that. I would get pizza. Sometimes I would just get French fries, and things like that. It was all free. And many times I would order a breakfast. You get they have a menu card at night on your room door, and you get orange juice, coffee, cereal, eggs, oatmeal, dry cereal, a glass of milk, not much, pancakes, had very few things, but they had stuff. So I would usually fill it out, and I would get maybe some pastry and orange juice and coffee or something, and I'd put it outside at night, and they would call you in the morning. You tell them what time you want it. I think it would go till about 7:30, even 8 o'clock in the morning, maybe till 9. I don't remember. And it would start, I think, at 6, maybe even earlier. And you would tell them what time you wanted it, and then they'd call you on the phone, and they confirm it, and then they bring it to your cabin. They wanted to make sure you were awake. If you didn't answer the phone, they'd call again and again and then give up. So the big crank on a joke is if you were traveling with your friends and you wanted to play a joke on them, you take one of those cards and you check. You want orange juice for 4, you want coffee for 4, pancakes for 4, a big load of stuff. Put it on their door, and then they didn't use the call at night. They would just show up and bang on your door. And your friend would get woken up, and practical joke because you didn't have to pay for it. So everything you do now is lines. You show up for the dining room. Most of the ships would always tell you got early seating, which would be 5:30, 6 o'clock, and then they had an 8 o'clock. I think it was 6 and 8, something like that. And the people that got out from the early dinner would see the early show in the theater, and the ones that got out to the late dinner would see the late show. The comedians in the early show usually kept it clean, and the comedians in the late show were dirty. Other than that, it would be the same thing. So a lot of it was like a Broadway production. That would be the same, where they really did a good job. They had smoke, and they had lasers and all kinds of lights and props and singing and an orchestra, and it was a genuine production. It would go an hour or so, and people would order drinks at the show, but they did a really nice job. They always did. All the cruise ships did a really good job. And then not every day would you have a Broadway production. The next day you might have a magician. The next day a comedian or a gymnast. But a few days a week, you would have the big show. The first night of the cruise, you'd never have the big show because people have been traveling in airports and they get to the boat and they're exhausted and they eat and they just go to their room and they take a shower and they watch TV or go to sleep. They don't do anything. The boat's rather empty the first night of the cruise. There's not much going on. They have the disco open, the gambling casinos open, the bars are open, and they usually would have not much of a show, if any show, maybe a comedian or not much. They have other places where you would see, dancing and old songs. So anyway, the cruise industry loaded the people up. Everything you do want is a line, and it's crowded, and it's all expensive, expensive, expensive. Everything you got to buy. People buy the alcohol. I don't like alcohol now, but I used to buy beers on the boat. What I used to do, really. Once in a blue moon, years and years ago, I tried having alcohol, and it really didn't work out well for me. So the beers, I used to buy ale. I used to like it, but I wouldn't have one. Maybe 5, 6 hours later, I'd have another or something. I was never really a big boozer. So now for the liquor, I think back then the liquor was $3.50. A beer was about the same. And now they're getting $15 for drinks. So they're doing the same thing Disney did. Disney pushed the limit. Disney took their prices and ran them up to the roof. They got experts to figure out the most amount of money they could charge and still get people to come. But now it's not working for them. The spiritual warfare, of course, made it worse because they're not going to be able to entice people to throw their savings away to have a vacation there that's a very unrestful vacation. The cruise ships can be a restful vacation if you want it to be. You go up to the pool, you get a lounge chair, you lay around, you go to the cabin, you take a nap if you want, you go watch the show, you eat, you take it easy, but Disney is all about waiting online. The best Disney is supposed to be the one in Japan, in Tokyo, by the way. But a lot of the rides, when you go on the rides, like the dark rides, they talk to you in Japanese, which is not anything it's gonna put a wet blanket on the experience. A roller coaster, there's no talking, but when you don't want to wait on the line, they charge about $12 a person to buy these special passes to bypass the line, not on the whole park, on each ride. So if there's 4 of you, you're paying $50 almost to bypass the lines, which are usually 45 minutes to an hour and a half. See, Disney's packing too many people in. They are too greedy and they're killing themselves, like Vegas did. Vegas made it for decades. They got big after World War II. They were giving people breakfast. Even in the 70s, you were able to get a breakfast for $3. A nice breakfast. For $6.95, you'd get a big steak buffet. You could have a steak or roast beef or pot roast. A really nice buffet. And now they're charging $50 to $100, $125 for the buffet per person. They get greedy and they blow it, and they're ruining it. And that's what Disney did. Now, I haven't seen Disney make an adjustment because they don't know what to do, because they've been coming under spiritual warfare. If they had a brain, what they would do is start cutting their hotel rates right away. Bring them way the heck down. I used to go to the really good hotels, like at Universal Studios, more than Disney, but they used to be a little under or a little over $300 a night, but they were really nice hotel. That was the one on the water. I forget what they called it. It looked just like this place in Italy, and I think it was Italy. And now they're getting $700 for these hotels. The same, I used to go to beachfront Disney. It would be $225, $275. Now it's, $600, $700, $800. It's not worth it. And, you go there for 4 nights, you're spending what, $3,200 on your hotel. Then you got your park admission, your meals, your incidentals. You're spending a fortune over there. 2 people could go to Disney for 4 days and even 5 days, and really nice hotel. And well, for 4 days, it used to run about $1,600. But I used to have season passes, so I didn't have to buy the entry. But season passes were if you wanted everything in the park. You wanted all the Disney parks. You didn't want blackout for the holidays. And you wanted the water slide parks and the other stuff they had. It was $900 a year. And, I was living in Florida, so it was easy. So Disney's killing themselves. Vegas is killing themselves. And Trump's economy is helping this fail for them because they can't sustain in this economy because the people don't have the money to go there and waste it, and they are not getting their witchcraft out anymore. I'll be right back. The witchcraft is what makes businesses in America and the world work. When they don't have their witchcraft, they start falling apart. Not yet, no. So now let's talk about Monaco. We did a lot of spiritual warfare on Monaco, and they started getting Muslims. Now they have no mosques in Monaco. They're anti-Muslim. They're very discriminatory. They're basically into the European white person. There's very few black people. I don't ever see any black people living in Monaco or even there. I mean, it's like 1 in a few thousand. They do have a synagogue in Monaco, I checked. And they have churches in Monaco. I think Catholic or something. I don't know. They got some kind of churches. It's all the same garbage, satanic. And they had a Muslim guy praying to Allah in Monaco openly, and they had to stop him. And he said, no, Muslims could pray anywhere. And now they have a Muslim problem in Monaco. And the problem is Monaco is right between France and Italy, which both countries are chock full of Muslims, and they're starting to give Monaco a hard time. I think it's funny. Their demons are not operating, and they can't defend themselves. The Muslims that are S-bots realize it, and they're moving in on Monaco. Let's pray for something. My Heavenly Father, Yehovah, B'Shem Yeshua HaMashiach, I pray you reveal to us, I guess through me, the other training places for the S-bots like Monaco is. And I pray you reveal to us where they're also being trained. Okay, how to operate like what they're not. And I pray you reveal it to us through me, I guess, where we can launch spiritual warfare in these other places. There have to be others, because this one just specializes in white, Anglo-Saxon looking Europeans. There must be others for Latino, Oriental, Black, and whatever. We Arabic, Jewish maybe, and I'd like to know where these places are, and we can go to work on them. B'Shem Yeshua HaMashiach. So you can agree with that, and we'll get them. We hit a gold mine with Monaco. They are not going to be able to tolerate the Muslims. They got a great police department there. They train their cops for 2 years. American police generally train 4 to 6 months. Okay, 2 years is like, I never heard of a police department doing 2 years of training. I mean, that's onset training until they hit the streets. It's 2 years before they hit the streets. That's huge. I don't understand it, but that's what they do. So I don't know. I don't know how they're going to handle the Muslim. It's just going to depend on how many. They're definitely discriminatory. It's not a real democracy. It's a king. It's a monarchy. They call it a monarchy or something like that, democracy, but it's not. It's a monarchy. Prince Albert, I think the dude's name is, or something. Runs it. They'd have to attack him through France and Italy, mostly France, because they're kind of under France. If France gets into a war with Iran, maybe Iran will attack Monaco. I don't know. I don't think they care about Monaco, but they might. They've got some of the most expensive real estate in the world. People, for what I'll tell you, is not nice apartments, pay $15 to $25 million. You're talking like 3-bedroom, 3,000 square feet or something, 2,500 square feet, not real elaborate. Most everything has some kind of view in Monaco. A lot of it faces the ocean. It's a very small place. Okay. Let me check the live stream, see if we got questions or prayer requests. Stubborn Trump supporters still believe in him. I used to, but not anymore. I thought Trump would be a little interesting at the beginning, but he rapidly disappointed. A lot of the survivalist preppers, gun people, are really sick and tired of Trump now. It didn't start that way, but it got that way. Yeah, the Chernobyl power was taken out. I know that. Uh, we're in the times of recompenses to the nations regarding what they're doing to Israel. That's undoubted. That's definitely going on. And the world doesn't usually know that. They're not really aware of it. No, I'm not getting any questions. Let me check real quick in my social media and see if we had any developments recently. I think the Lord is telling me to do this. Let's see if anything recently happened. Something could have blown up with the flotilla, but because it's Yom Kippur and a lot of these people are observant and don't know it's not the right day or month. We're in the 8th month. No, I'm not picking up anything. No, the media is going to be, it's going to be rather quiet. Oops. All right, let me refresh and see what we got. Oh yeah, a lot of these guys are belly aching that there was 6 TACAMO nuclear command aircraft flying over the continental U.S. at the same time. Great. That means America is on alert about something. The something would be Iran or Russia, most likely. So I told you Iran went on military alert. They expect an imminent attack from Israel and or America. And France told the people yesterday in France, top general, that they could be at war even tonight, which would have been last night. Uh, the guy that said it was the top general in France, the one that runs the army. Uh, what is Russia going to do when Ukraine starts striking deep inside Russia? Nothing. Unless he can convince China, North Korea, and Iran to all attack America and America's allies at the same time, he's going to do nothing. That's the only chance they got, is to all come at the same time, Belarus too. Then they got a really good chance. Let's see. No, because it's Yom Kippur, most of the news is not updating that I get. No, I get some news, of course, that's not affected by this, but a lot I do get. Let's see what's cooking over here. Somebody says the Bible is Zionist. That's true. It absolutely is. So if you're going to be called a Zionist, it's like you're a Bible believer. You know, what did God do? I mean, a lot of people don't even know this. In Genesis 15, the ones that know it just think it's going to happen down the road, always down the road. Genesis 15, verse 18. In the same day, Jehovah made a brit, a covenant, and God's not a covenant breaker, with Abram, saying, unto thy seed have I given this land from the river of Egypt unto the great river, the Euphrates. And he names the tribes, the Canaanites, the Kenites, the Kezanites, the Cadmonites, a lot of K's, huh? And the Hittites, that's Turkey. And the Perizzites, and the Rephaites, and the Amorites, and the Canaanites, and the Girgashites, and the Jebusites. Now, we don't have that land now, but we will, and that's Zionism. What does that piece of land entail? Starting in Africa, it entails everything in Egypt to the right or the east of the Nile River. Okay? The same thing east of the Nile River for Sudan and South Sudan and Kenya and Uganda. Then it got Somalia, Djibouti, Eritrea, Ethiopia, east of the Nile River. And then we go into the Middle East or Israel area, and what we got there is you got Yemen, which is Edom, which will be a wasteland forever. So that's not, I mean, it's ours, but what are you going to do with it? It's a wasteland. Saudi Arabia, Jordan. Now, Jordan is Moab, so central and southern Jordan will be busted up. But Ammon, which is northern Jordan, the capital, will side with Israel and be blessed. They'll do pretty good for themselves. Then you got to the west of the Euphrates River, Syria, Iraq, and Turkey. It actually comes to about 2/3 of Turkey, and of course the Israel we have today, and all of Lebanon, and you also would include Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, the UAE, and Oman. So just to take a whack at it, this land given to us by covenant, which is stronger than promise, is about 100 times the size of the land we have now. Okay? And it's going to come true. And what Satan has is these heathen nations, his chosen people, the Muslims, sitting on Israel's land, pumping the oil and going around and buying Rolls Royces and yachts and private jets. Okay, while Israel gets beaten down. That's coming to an end. You already saw it's the year of recompenses. Look what happened to Hezbollah in Lebanon. Look what happened to Hamas in Gaza. How many times did we hit the Houthis, but it's not over with them yet, right? Look what happened to Syria. Iraq is scared, and look how bad Iran's busted up now. You know, you gotta understand it. Did Turkey pay the price yet? No, not really. They will. Lebanon paid a big price. Egypt's going to pay a price. You know, you watch. I mean, Egypt's going to go into a 40-year diaspora. And the siege in Zechariah 12, I was trying to see if you could make a case for the siege to just be like breaking diplomatic relations and not buying or selling to them. No, you got to actually gather around the borders. So we're not at the siege yet, but we're working our way there. It's begun, and it needs to escalate, and it will, and it could escalate very quickly. Now, when does Elijah start training the Levites? That's the million-dollar question for what happens next. Is that what happens next? I think so. But when? And it's not going to just be Elijah running around by himself. Enoch will be with him, the two witnesses. And because we see in Zechariah 12:6, the both of them burn up the enemies round about. So it's the two of them. And maybe Elijah will be training the Levites, and Enoch will be doing something else. So I don't know when that happens. I would assume it happens before the appearing, because when he appears, he gives us a new heart, a heart of flesh, and he puts the law in our heart, in our inward parts. So why would Elijah need to be training the Levites in Malachi 3 if the appearing already happened, and the appearing's in Malachi 4? So it seems to me that the training of the Levites will happen before redemption. So we could see that any day, and that's why I keep talking about you guys coming to Israel. When that happens, I don't think the government's going to be throwing true believers out of Israel, because Elijah's not going to like it. And I don't even know if there is a democracy left anymore. Maybe the Iran does attack us and the democracy crumbles. and then Elisha and Enoch step in as the judges and start running Israel. I don't know. But they're more powerful than the IDF. By what? By like a millionfold? So, be better off that way. So we're at the point where it's very difficult to pin everything down, but we're close, extremely close. And it's like a buildup, you know. There's so many fires, you know. Earthquakes are coming. Continued whirlwind of the Lord falling on the head of the wicked until it accomplishes its purposes is going on. There's 2 hurricanes now in the ocean. I believe it's the Atlantic that are kind of dancing with each other, and they might combine into one of those perfect storms. I don't know. I don't know. They haven't hit land yet. So it's very, very interesting times. And America, the signs with the fires, I will kindle fires in and around your cities, and that's going on big time. The drought, more than half of America's in drought. The violence in your land, there's mass shootings practically every day. Ruler against ruler, the courts are constantly fighting against Trump. The mayors and the governors are fighting against Trump. The other politicians in the Congress are fighting against Trump. They're very divided in America right now. They're not on the same page. They're all divided. So we're watching and we're waiting. That's all we can do, right? All we can do. Okay. My Heavenly Father, B'Shem Yeshua HaMashiach, I come to you in prayer for me and my wife and all the true believers that follow the channel, that are in the group, that walk in the true gospel and have the true gospel. I pray that you would remove from us all the works of the unclean spirits, all the witchcraft, sorcery, spells, enchantments, and that they don't surveillance us using any means at their disposal in any way, shape, or form. And I pray for us, for our finances, that we would all have enough business and work and jobs to meet our needs and then some. I pray for our peace, safety, protection, joy, love. And I pray we all be happy, healthy, and whole. And I pray that all our animals and pets be happy, healthy, and whole with strength, stamina, and endurance. And we have strength, stamina, endurance, and your healing and recuperative power flow through us, and we keep getting healed. And I pray all this, and we know the scriptures, and you reveal more in the scriptures to us about these days, and we could get more focused on what's going to happen next. And I pray all this to you, my Heavenly Father, B'Shem Yeshua HaMashiach. Now, since we are on high war risk, if things happen, I'm likely going to start. Oh, you can agree with the prayer, of course, and it will be more powerful. And I'm going to likely be doing live streams during the day and night when new things happen. I will put the live streams up on Twitter and Telegram also. Okay? The channel is growing again, surprisingly. And keep doing your spiritual warfare. Read the Bible, pray, and you'll do fine. We just got to wait. But I think we're all going to be taken by surprise when things happen. We know the things that are going to happen, which the church and the world doesn't know, but we know. But we don't have the timing. They don't, and we don't. The way I'm looking at this thing now with war with Iran, or maybe Russia, most likely Iran, you got a dead bare bones minimum of a week and probably 2 or 3 weeks till it goes down. Even in a week, the ships are still not going to, maybe one more will be here, the aircraft carriers. I don't know, maybe they could start in a week, but I think it's going to be longer than that. We'll find out. And remember, Iran knows it's coming, they could take a preemptive strike. And Russia knows their demise is coming, they might take a preemptive strike, although I'm not thinking you'll see that from Russia. I don't think so. It could always happen, but you might see it from Iran. That's what I got, kids, and I'm out. And I send my shalom to all those who love Yeshua HaMashiach. And remember, it's not Yom Kippur. Okay, I'm out.